They say the smell of home is supposed to comfort you. But as I watched my daughter Jessica spray her expensive Le Labo room fragrance around my reading room without so much as a knock on the door, I realized that what once felt like love now felt like erasure. I had been living with Jessica and her husband Mark for 3 years, ever since my arthritis made the stairs in my old house too difficult to manage. At 78, I thought I was being practical, moving in with family who claimed they wanted to take care of me. What I didn't expect was to become invisible in my own existence, a source of inconvenience that needed to be managed, controlled, and ultimately eliminated. The morning that changed everything started like any other. I was in what had become my sanctuary, the small reading room at the back of the house where I kept my books and a few precious photographs of my late husband, Robert. The room faced the garden, and I loved watching the morning light filter through the lace curtains I had hung myself. It was the only space in the house that still felt like mine. Jessica entered without knocking, her face already twisted in that familiar expression of barely contained irritation. In her hand was the expensive room spray, and she began dispensing it liberally around the space, as if she were fumigating for pests. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I have to say something," she announced, not sounding sorry at all. "This room has that old person smell. We're having guests for dinner tonight, and I can't have the whole house reeking." The words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my book carefully, buying myself a moment to process what she had just said. Old person smell, as if my very existence had become offensive to her. "What does an old person smell like, Jessica?" I asked quietly, though my heart was pounding. "Is it the smell of the medicine I take to stay alive? Or the smell of the cream I rub on my joints so they hurt less when I hold your son while you're at work?" She avoided my eyes, pretending she hadn't heard the pain in my voice. "I already ordered you an air purifier," she said dismissively. "It'll be delivered tomorrow." Then she left, and I sat there, surrounded by the chemical fog of her disapproval, feeling smaller than I had in years. That evening, as Jessica's friends filled the house with their laughter and wine-fueled conversations, I remained in my room. Through the thin walls, I could hear them discussing their latest renovations, their children's achievements, their vacation plans. No one asked about me, and Jessica made no mention of her mother living just down the hall. I might as well have been a ghost. The next morning brought a conversation that would prove to be the beginning of the end. Mark approached me in the kitchen where I was making my coffee, his expression serious in a way that immediately put me on guard. "Mom, Evelyn," he said, using the formal address that had always felt cold to me. "We need to talk about the piano." My heart clenched. The piano was a 1940s Baldwin Baby Grand that Robert had saved for months to buy me for our 10th wedding anniversary. It had been the centerpiece of our living room for 40 years, where I played everything from Chopin to Christmas carols, where our children took their first piano lessons, where music had been the soundtrack of our family life. "It needs to go," Mark continued, his tone matter of fact. "Jessica wants to convert that space into a yoga studio, and frankly, it's just taking up room. When was the last time you even played it?" The question stung because it was true. My arthritis had made playing difficult, and the music that had once flowed from my fingers now came haltingly, painfully. But that didn't mean the piano had lost its value. It held 40 years of memories. 40 years of Robert's love, made manifest in mahogany and ivory keys. "That piano is not for sale," I said firmly, surprised by the strength in my own voice. Mark's expression didn't change. "We'll see," he said, and walked away. 3 days later, I learned what "we'll see" meant. I was in my room when I heard the sound of heavy footsteps and men's voices in the living room. When I emerged, I found 2 movers carefully maneuvering my piano toward the front door. Mark stood supervising, his arms crossed, looking for all the world like he owned everything in the house. What is happening? I demanded, my voice shaking. I sold it, he said without looking at me. We need the money and the space. You don't play it anymore anyway. You had no right, I said, my hands trembling with rage and shock. This house, my savings, helped build this house. Mark turned to me then, and I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes that I had never noticed before. That was generous of us, to let you stay here, he said. But the mortgage is in our name. The house is legally ours. It was a lie, though I wouldn't discover that until later. But in that moment, watching my husband's love being wheeled out the front door, I felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, but something deeper, my sense of belonging, of having any power over my own life. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in subtle cruelty. During family dinners, Jessica and Mark would discuss their plans as if I weren't sitting right there. Their upcoming trip to Hawaii, the renovations they wanted to make, their son Leo's college prospects. When Leo, my 16-year-old grandson, tried to include me in the conversation, Jessica would redirect him with sharp looks that made it clear my participation was not welcome. I began to feel like I was disappearing, becoming less real each day. My opinions were dismissed, my needs ignored, my presence treated as an inconvenience to be managed. I was fed and housed, but I was not loved. I was not respected. I was not seen. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in October. Unable to sleep, I had gone to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard voices coming from Mark's home office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see them hunched over a desk covered with papers. I should have walked away. I should have minded my own business. But something about their hushed, urgent tones made me pause and listen. The lawyer says it's straightforward, Mark was saying. We just need to establish that she's showing signs of cognitive decline and can't manage her finances anymore. Jessica's voice was lower, but I caught enough words to understand. Guardianship papers, medical evaluation, financial control. They were discussing how to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could gain control of my remaining assets, including the property rights I apparently still held despite Mark's lies about ownership. I stood there in the dark hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid they might hear it. My own daughter and her husband were plotting to steal what little independence I had left. They weren't just disrespecting me. They were planning to legally erase my autonomy entirely. I crept back to my room and lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and feeling something new stirring inside me. It wasn't just hurt anymore, or even anger. It was a cold, clear determination that surprised me with its strength. The next morning, I played the part they expected of me. I was a little more confused than usual, a little more forgetful. I asked Jessica to repeat herself several times, fumbled with simple tasks, looked blank when Mark mentioned financial matters. They exchanged meaningful glances, clearly pleased with what they saw as evidence supporting their case. But while I was playing the doddering old woman in public, I was making phone calls in private. The first was to Harrison Burke, Robert's old law partner, and one of the few people I trusted completely. Harrison, I said when he answered, I need you. They think I'm a lamb being led to slaughter. It's time to show them this old wolf still has teeth. Harrison had handled Robert's estate and knew my financial situation better than anyone. Within an hour, he had confirmed what I suspected. I was still the legal owner of the house. My name was on the original deed. And while Jessica and Mark paid the mortgage, that gave them no ownership rights. I had been tricked into believing I was powerless when I actually held all the cards. Over the next week, I began to plan. I contacted a real estate agent. Harrison recommended someone discreet who specialized in quick cash sales. The housing market was hot, and she assured me we could close within 48 hours if I was serious about selling. I was serious about everything. I also began looking at senior living communities, Not the dreary nursing homes Jessica had threatened me with, but active adult communities where people my age lived full, independent lives. I found one called Sunrise Gardens, 30 minutes away, where residents tended vegetable plots, took art classes, and treated each other with dignity and respect. The waiting list was long, but Harrison made some calls, and suddenly, an apartment became available. While I was making these arrangements, I began boxing up my most precious possessions. I labeled the boxes donations for church and left them in plain sight. Jessica and Mark saw them and assumed I was finally accepting my fate, clearing out my clutter in preparation for whatever institutional future they had planned for me. They had no idea I was planning my escape. The opportunity came when they announced a weekend camping trip with Leo. They would leave Friday afternoon and return Sunday evening. Perfect. The moment their car disappeared around the corner, an unmarked moving truck pulled up to the house. Diana Martinez, the community manager from Sunrise Gardens, arrived shortly after to help coordinate everything. She was a warm woman in her 50s who had dealt with many families in transition and understood the delicate nature of my situation. We worked quickly and efficiently. The donation boxes were loaded first, followed by my clothes, books, the photographs that meant everything to me, and the potted tomato plants I had been tending in the backyard garden. I took only what was truly mine, nothing that belonged to the house or to them. My last act before leaving was to place an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a formal notice from Harrison's law firm informing them that the house had been sold and they had 30 days to vacate the premises as required by law. Attached was a brief handwritten note. Jessica, you said my room smelled. Soon, this entire house will be free of my scent. Scent forever. I locked the door behind me and handed the keys to Diana. As we drove away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The aftermath was swift and devastating, at least for them. Jessica and Mark returned to find my note and spent the weekend calling me frantically, but I had blocked their numbers. Their calls to the bank confirmed that my accounts had been moved into a secure trust fund. They had lost not only their free housing, but also the financial windfall they had been planning to steal from me. By Monday morning, word had spread through their social circle that Jessica and Mark had been forced out of their home by Jessica's own mother. The humiliation was complete. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new apartment at Sunrise Gardens. The morning light that streamed through my windows was bright and clean, carrying the scent of real lavender from the garden below, not the artificial fragrance of chemical room sprays. I arranged my books on new shelves, hung Robert's photograph in a place of honor, and felt truly at home for the first time in years. A week later, Leo appeared at my door. He had lied to his parents about going to a study group and taken 2 buses to find me. When I opened the door, he threw his arms around me, and I could feel him shaking. "Grandma, I'm so sorry," he whispered. I knew what they were doing was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop them. I held him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of his young body. "You don't have anything to apologize for, sweetheart," I told him. "You're just a child. It wasn't your job to protect me." We spent the afternoon baking chocolate chip cookies in my new kitchen, and Leo told me about school, about his dreams of studying environmental science, about the girl he liked but was too shy to talk to. Our relationship, the only one in the family that had remained pure and loving, was intact. Before he left, I pressed a spare key into his hand. "This door is always open to you," I said. "Always." 2 weeks later, Jessica showed up. She looked terrible, thin and pale with dark circles under her eyes. She had been crying, and her usual perfect makeup was streaked and smudged. "Mom, please," she said, before I had even fully opened the door. "I made a mistake." We made mistakes. I was stressed about money and Mark's job situation, and I wasn't thinking clearly. "Can't you undo this?" We don't have anywhere else to go. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at my small dining table, gesturing for her to take the chair across from me. For a moment, I just studied her face, this woman who had grown inside my body, whom I had loved unconditionally for 45 years. "Jessica," I said finally, my voice calm and clear. "I spent my entire adult life building a home. You turned it into a house. I spent my golden years trying to love you. You treated me like a burden. Your apology isn't about healing my pain. It's about solving your problem." She started to protest, to make excuses. But I held up my hand. "The answer is no," I continued. "Your disrespect wasn't a feeling I imagined. It was a choice you made, over and over again. Now you need to live with the consequences of those choices." I walked to the door and held it open. She left without another word. 6 months have passed since then. I've made friends here at Sunrise Gardens. Real friends who value my opinions and enjoy my company. I'm taking a watercolor painting class and have discovered a talent I never knew I possessed. Leo visits every weekend, and we've grown closer than ever. Last week, I received a postcard from Harrison. Jessica and Mark had found a small rental apartment across town. Mark was working as a car salesman now, no longer the high-powered investment broker he had pretended to be. They were struggling, but they were surviving. I felt no satisfaction in their difficulties, but I felt no guilt either. I had not destroyed their lives. I had simply stopped allowing them to destroy mine. This morning, I'm sitting in the community garden, painting a watercolor of the lavender bushes that grow outside my window. The sun is warm on my shoulders, and I can hear my neighbors chatting as they tend their vegetables. Mrs. Chen is teaching her granddaughter how to tie tomato vines, and Mr. Rodriguez is sharing his famous salsa recipe with anyone who will listen. I am 78 years old, and I am free. I am respected. I am valued. I am home. The paint flows easily from my brush now, creating purple petals that seem to glow with their own inner light. I add touches of yellow and white, capturing the way the morning sun illuminates each bloom. This is what healing looks like, I think. Not forgiveness or reconciliation, but the simple act of choosing yourself, of deciding that your peace matters more than other people's comfort. I have learned that home is not a building or a place. Home is the feeling of being safe to be yourself, surrounded by people who see your worth and treat you accordingly. I had that once with Robert, and I thought I had lost it forever when he died. But I was wrong. I just had to be brave enough to claim it for myself. The lavender painting is nearly finished now. Tomorrow, I'll start a new one. Maybe the roses by the front gate or the sunflowers that Leo and I planted last month. There is no hurry, no pressure, no one telling me that what I create is worthless or takes up too much space. In the distance, I can hear Leo's laughter as he plays basketball with some of the other grandchildren who visit here. He has grown 3 inches this year, and his voice is changing. But he still hugs me just as tightly as ever. Our relationship remains untainted by the poison that infected the rest of the family. And that gives me hope that some good came from all of this pain. As I clean my brushes and pack up my easel, I think about the woman I was 3 years ago, the one who moved in with Jessica and Mark, believing that love meant accepting whatever scraps of affection and respect they were willing to give. That woman was tired, defeated, convinced that her best years were behind her. She was wrong about everything. My best years are right now, right here, in this garden full of friends and flowers and endless possibility. I am not the victim of my story anymore. I am the author, and I'm writing a beautiful ending.